Hi again everyone, Alastair here from Right at Home. Did you know that more than half of over 65 will have a fall in any one given year? And that the number one reason for over 65s having an emergency admission to hospital is for a fall? In this episode of my series, Supporting Your Parents as They Age, we're going to be having a look at falls and what can be done to reduce the risk of falling and also the impact of falling if one were to happen. We're going to look at three different things. Firstly, increasing your parents' mobility and stability. Secondly, environmental factors. So around the home, what can we do to reduce the risks that are there? And thirdly, the consequences of a fall. What we can do to reduce the impact if a fall were to happen. So firstly, looking at stability and mobility. There are lots of factors that can increase an individual's risk of falling, reduce their stability and mobility, and there's things that we can do about it. The first one, and probably the most important, is exercise. So if you stay reasonably fit and able, you're much less likely to have a fall. There's lots of different exercises that you can do. For example, right at home we run a Love to Move exercise, which is seated exercise, but it still does increase people's stability. There are specific falls awareness exercise classes that you might find in your local area, but just getting out and about and going for walks will improve stability and therefore reduce the likelihood of having a fall. Another thing is diet and hydration. So dehydration is something that can really reduce someone's stability. So it's really important to stay hydrated through the day. Alcohol consumption. I think the odd glass of wine is probably not going to have any negative impact. In fact, there's been some studies to show that that can be a positive thing. But a few glasses of wine is likely to reduce someone's stability and therefore lead to an increased risk of falling. In terms of eating, it's important to keep blood sugar levels right, so a good, healthy, balanced diet, and it's actually better to have more regular, smaller meals, so perhaps 5 smaller meals during the day rather than a few larger meals. Clothing and shoes. Clothing that allows you good freedom of movement is better. But footwear is probably the most important thing. Making sure that you have good fitting shoes without high heels. If you're going to wear slippers, then important that they're slippers that aren't going to just fall on and off as you walk along. Walking aids. There's a huge variety of walking aids that are available, from just a stick to frames and all sorts of things. You could get advice from what might be suitable from either your local occupational therapist, which you could be referred to through your GP practice, or if you're to visit a mobility shop, they have a range of equipment there that you would be able to try and get advice from them in terms of what would be beneficial for you and make sure that it's fitted appropriately for you. And lastly in this section is really being sensible. Clearly climbing on top of a chair to change a light bulb in the ceiling is a higher risk. So just making sure that your loved one is being sensible about taking those risks, and perhaps wait till you go and visit them and get you to take those risks instead. I remember my grandfather always felt that he should empty the bowl of washing up water into the garden rather than just pouring it down the drain. And I can remember him walking across the kitchen and then struggling to step down the step outstairs carrying this big bowl of heavy water. And it took a lot of persuasion to persuade him that that wasn't the most sensible thing for him to be doing. So secondly, we were going to look at environmental factors. So that by environmental factors, I mean what's around you in the place that you live and where you go. So one thing you could do here is ask for an occupational therapist to visit. As I mentioned earlier, you should be able to ask one to visit by being referred through your GP practice. And they would look at the whole house, they would look at whether you should have grab rails and all that sort of thing. But perhaps before you get to that stage, there are things you can do yourself. Have a look around the house, all those rugs that are lying around, The edge of every single one of them is a trip hazard. Any electrical appliances that you have, if they've got cords that are stretched out across the floor, then that's a trip hazard. I know that when I go to visit my gran with my children, I'm very aware of the things that they leave lying around on the floor. So it's important to stay tidy and not leave things out of their normal place, because those then, if they're unexpected, can be a trip hazard. I should have mentioned earlier, actually eyesight is a thing as well. So important to make sure that your loved one has their eyesight checked regularly and is wearing the right glasses, because obviously if you can't see so well, then you can't see the trip hazards in front of you. Linked into that is also lighting. So important to keep the house well lit, where your loved one will be walking around, and perhaps look at, you can have motion sensitive lights, so it might be worth having something like that perhaps in the bathroom or in the bedroom, so that if your mum or dad gets out of bed in the night to go to the toilet, the light will come on automatically. So the last thing I was going to talk about briefly were the consequences of a fall, or the impact of having a fall. Obviously, if someone is living on their own and they have a fall, I think the biggest risk is that they may remain undiscovered for quite a while. If they're able to get to a phone themselves and call for help, then that's great. If they're not able to, then there's a couple of options there. So you've probably heard or seen of the pendant alarms people wear around their neck or wear on their wrist. So those can be good if someone has a fall and they're able and capable of pressing that button to call for help. We've also introduced a service, Right at Home Light, which is a phone or a tablet where the person can press a button once or more times a day to confirm that they are okay. The benefit of that over the pendant alarm is that it's a kind of reactive service. If they haven't pressed the button, then things would be escalated, so we would get people round to make sure that they are okay. The other thing is obviously having care visits, or you visiting yourself regularly to make sure that your loved one is okay. So I think that's it for my session today on falls and reducing the risk. There's certainly lots more resources you can find online on the NHS website and the Age UK website and many more. If you have any questions or would like any further advice, don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Thanks very much. Bye for now.